Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would review this little video that I found very, very interesting. This video is going to be by this one channel called 78 Sports TV. Now, 78 Sports TV is a channel that is a part of the LDBC, and usually, I've expressed my, opinions about them, and all in all, usually what they try to do. And 78 Sports TV, he does get on that, cultish type of mentality as well at times, especially with certain pro-racial agendas. But this video I thought was very, very interesting because 78 Sports TV, he's going to be talking about Canelo Alvarez in this video. And of course, Canelo Alvarez, he's usually one of my more favorite subjects because Canelo, when I take a look at him, there's just certain people that when you take a look at, no matter what sport you're watching, and I'm not sure how many of you guys may watch other sports besides boxing. But, if you've been around for a very long time, and let's say that you watch NBA basketball. Now, I was born in 1998, so I can't claim that I ever watched Michael Jordan. But when I take a look overall at certain highlights, or when I take a look overall at certain finals appearances, or especially during those early 90s years when he faced off against teams like the 91 Lakers and the 92 Trailblazers and, especially the 93 Suns, Michael Jordan overall, I just don't think that there's any basketball player, in my opinion, that is really greater than him. I don't think that there's a basketball player, even though that a lot of people, they try to promote this narrative. I don't think that there's a basketball player really, in all honesty, that's more complete than him. Of course, a certain amount of people, they try to argue it, these days because LeBron James, he averages more assists and rebounds and blah, blah, blah. But that's really just because of the way LeBron James plays. When we actually want to take a look at and see, with certain statistics and PER numbers, and not only that, but who clearly was the greater defensive player is clearly Michael Jordan. There really is no debate about it. And if you want to talk about other conversations in other sports, we can talk about football. If you're talking about who, in my opinion, is the most talented quarterback that I've ever seen, in my opinion, it's either Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes. But in terms of the greatest quarterback of all time, it has to be Tom Brady. It just is what it is. And and I grew up watching Tom Brady throughout his peak, at least usually. I didn't see the first three Super Bowl rings, but I got to see the last four. I seen the three with the New England Patriots, the final three with the New England Patriots, and I got to see his last Super Bowl performance last year against the Kansas City Chiefs. There's no quarterback that is greater than Tom Brady. It just is what it is. When you watch Tom Brady play, especially the way that he comes up in big moments, there's just no one overall that is just better or greater than this dude. If you watch tennis, if you take a look at Novak Djokovic, at least in my view, there is no tennis player, at least in the men's circuit, that is greater or better than that of Novak Djokovic, in my opinion. No matter what sport you go to. In my opinion, Canelo Alvarez, at least at the certain moment overall that he is in right now, I think Canelo Alvarez is starting to go somewhat into that conversation. Now, is this me saying that Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, as of right now, is a top 10 boxer of all time? No, I can't necessarily put that acclaim on him quite yet because I do think that he has to have a little bit of a lengthier career. I think all in all that he does need to accomplish a little bit more. I would say that Canelo Alvarez, in terms of right now, he would be probably on that, Joe Calzaghe and Andre Ward type of level. That's kind of where I would put him at, meaning what? He's probably within my top 30 boxers of all time. But before you really head into that top 20 to top 10 range, you're going to have to do something that has almost never been accomplished before. So basically, who would he be in the conversation with, if you were to be in my top 10 boxers of all time? Well, I think I've already given my list somewhat before, but my top 10 boxers of all time, usually they tend to be, I think Floyd Mayweather Jr. is in that conversation. I think that Manny Pacquiao, of course, is in that conversation. I think all in all that, Sugar Ray Leonard, is in that conversation. Debatably Roberto Duran, Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., of course. Marvin Hagler, if I didn't mention him. Roy Jones Jr., even though he gets left out of the conversation quite a bit, I think that he certainly deserves to be in that, top 10 of all time conversation. Rocky Marciano, Muhammad Ali, those are pretty much the fighters. Maybe I did not fill all the 10 spots, but those are pretty much the fighters, in my opinion, that, Sugar Ray Robinson, I forgot about him as well. Those are pretty much the fighters, in my opinion, that would be within the top 10 of all time. And when I take a look at Canelo Alvarez, just when I take a look at the way that he fights now, once again, I am going to have to see him, against Demetrius Andrade and Jamal Charlo and David Benavidez and possibly Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol. But when I take a look at Canelo Alvarez, I realize this about Canelo. if someone is going to defeat Canelo Alvarez, you're going to have to literally be one of those once in a lifetime generational type of talents. And there's just only one fighter within those weight divisions at 175 pounds by the name of Artur Beterbiev. He's the only one that I believe even has a solid chance over Canelo Alvarez. Maybe Dimitri Bivol as well, because he's highly skilled and he's a great athlete as well. But there's no other boxer out there in the world, in my opinion, that has really even that much of a chance against Canelo, at least within those weight divisions. Alexander Usyk would have a pretty decent chance over Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, but that, of course, because Alexander Usyk is decently sized over him. So, like I said, if Canelo is going to lose, I don't think that it's going to be anytime soon. I think that if he's going to lose, it'll probably be somewhere around 5 to 6 years later if Canelo Alvarez is even still boxing at that current moment in time. Because Canelo Alvarez's goal, in my opinion, it is very clear. I think that he wants to rack up as many great victories as he can and win in as many weight classes as he possibly can. Who knows? Canelo Alvarez, he may even possibly go after Alexander Usyk for the possible heavyweight titles. I don't know. That'll be very, very interesting. But of course, Alexander Usyk, if that were to happen, I think that he more than likely would have to beat Tyson Fury. So that's probably very, very heavily unlikely. But we'll see what happens. Anyways, 78 Sports TV, he's going to be talking about his opinion about Canelo Alvarez. And I don't necessarily always agree with what 78 Sports TV has to say. But I do think that what he has to say in this video is particularly interesting. And I'm going to be talking about, in my opinion, what potential Canelo Alvarez has in terms of making the top 10 boxers of all time, or do I think that he will make it there? So let's get into the video. Let's see what he has to say.
78 Sports TV here. Salute to the mighty LDBC, Lions Den Boxing Community. For those who don't know, now you know. Smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you'll be notified when I drop a new video, and also share the video. All right, so had an interesting conversation today on Trail Boxing Talk. Make sure y'all go subscribe to Trail Boxing Talk. We do shows over there, morning shows, Monday through Friday at about 11:20 a.m. Central Standard Time, okay? Now, we had a good discussion today about Canelo Alvarez and Artur Beterbiev. Artur Beterbiev had a great performance versus Marcus Brown. Now,
he certainly did, and I've already said this. In my opinion, Artur Beterbiev, now he is 36 years old. I don't know how much longer he is going to last, so we'll see what happens. You know, unfortunately, kind of just like the Cuban fighters, some of these very talented Eastern European fighters, especially the ones with a very talented amateur background, they don't always get the biggest fights of their career because they're very high risk and very low reward type of opponents. Because even though, they're Caucasian fighters, but even though they're Caucasians and certain people at the LDBC or new media especially, they always try to allege how, these guys have the complexion for the protection and that's why they're so protected. All this bullshit that they were alleging with Tyson Fury. But in all reality, there's just not a great promotion for a certain amount of those Eastern European boxers. They'll get some acclaim, by the media. They'll get some sort of a following, but, they're not going to get as much as, say, like the British overall Caucasian fighters or as the American Caucasian fighters. At least usually. You noticed overall that Tyson Fury, he's a person now, maybe this is because he got the win over Vladimir Klitschko, I'm not sure, maybe he accomplished more than them, but Tyson Fury, for example, he's a person that, out of any other Caucasian fighter in the past several years, he's gotten the most promotion out of any other one. So it's just very hard for some of those Eastern European boxers to kind of get the same promotion or to be marketed overall somewhat in a similar fashion. They'll still market them, they'll still be decently popular, but there's no, Eastern European boxer, especially when they've sort of been on the rise within the past several years. There's been none of them that, in my opinion, are going to be huge pay-per-view sellers, not unless they face a really big draw. So it is what it is.
Marcus Brown, nobody will ever accuse of being a legendary fighter, a great fighter. He's just a good, solid fighter. He had his ups and downs.
I would somewhat agree with that, but I would say that going into the Artur Beterbiev fight, that he was at least going in there as a solid A- fighter.
Throughout his career.
Drinking water before bed burns 46 pounds in 2 weeks. If you are struggling to lose weight and you're over 20...
Ups and downs throughout his career, but a good fighter. A credible win, right? and he was a champion. Artur Beterbiev unified titles by defeating Marcus Brown. And the conversation has started up again, okay, well, no, matter of fact, I don't even think, I think Artur Beterbiev already had both those belts, didn't he? Yeah, he already had both the belts. Yeah, Beterbiev already had the belts. Marcus Brown was the challenger. Okay, listen. Anyway, the conversation has started up again of Canelo Alvarez ducking Artur Beterbiev. Now, this is my opinion on it. Nobody will ever accuse me of being some Canelo fanboy. Nobody will ever do it in the history of the world. Not gonna happen.
No, you're not a fanboy of Canelo. You're more of a fanboy of Deontay Wilder and a certain other demographic. But it is what it is.
So I can freely tell you my honest opinion on this, right? Without y'all jumping to conclusions, acting like I'm riding some Canelo wave or something. This is just the truth of the matter. Artur Beterbiev, I don't believe, can beat Canelo Alvarez. And this is why. Artur Beterbiev...
Well, before overall he goes more into depth with it, what I'm going to say is this. There's a certain amount of fighters that can defeat Canelo Alvarez. The question is overall, will they? When Canelo Alvarez is at their best. Or, let me also put it in this perspective. Anyone overall can possibly get a big win like that in their career. We didn't think that George Kambosos was going to defeat Teofimo Lopez, but look at what happened. So, of course, anything can happen in the sport of boxing. Anyone can get hurt. Anyone can get knocked out by one solid shot. But the big question is that if Canelo Alvarez is at his 100% best, and if he takes that opponent seriously, and Canelo takes this sport very, very seriously. Canelo, overall, he wants to be in that same conversation with some of the all-time greats. Not even just the all-time greats. He wants to be in the same discussion as the top 10, the top 5 boxers of all time when his career is all done and over. He wants to be in that discussion. And I think he debatably will be.
Right now.
But just to answer the question, do I think that anyone could beat Canelo Alvarez if Canelo Alvarez is at his 100% peak potential? I think that maybe Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol, Alexander Usyk, those would be the only fighters that I would give a decently heavy chance to. Those would be the only ones. Because those are the only ones, in my opinion, that have a decent amount of boxing craft. I don't think that Jamal Charlo. I don't think that Demetrius Andrade. I don't think that David Benavidez. I don't think that Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez. I don't think that Joe Smith Jr. I don't think that any of those fighters are going to defeat Canelo Alvarez. I give all those fighters at max, maybe some of the light heavyweights you could give about a 40% chance. But people who are more Canelo Alvarez's own same size, like a Jamal Charlo, Demetrius Andrade, and David Benavidez, in my opinion, now you never know. I'm not saying 100% certainty, but in my opinion, those are not going to be the guys to defeat Canelo.
It's about 17-0. He is a talented fighter. Can't say young because he's about 36 years old. But he's young in his professional boxing career. Okay, with 17 bouts. Hard puncher, devastating puncher, a bruiser, come forward, stalker, seek and destroy type of a fighter. All right? And that's all great. But I've seen him before. Okay? Artur Beterbiev with only 17 fights only have faced 2 people that I can even tell you their names. One is Marcus Brown, and the other one is Alexander Volstik. Them other guys Beterbiev was beating, I don't even know them guys. And y'all don't.
That's true, but let me say this. Those 2 victories, I think, were actually decently impressive. Because Artur Beterbiev, he was not only able to beat them, he was able to basically pound them into submission. And those guys, they were no joke of fighters. Now, if you want to say Marcus Brown maybe was not 100% an A-grade fighter, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But you must understand, both of those fighters, especially Volstik, Alexander Volstik, both of those fighters had a very expansive and extensive Olympic background. And usually those fighters, they can usually tend to be very, very dangerous. Artur Beterbiev made them look like some bitches. like he overall literally crushed them inside the ring. He literally pounded them both into quitting. I mean, it was crazy. I've not seen a fighter do that in a very, very long time. I mean, basically, it would be like if someone were at 160 and they fought someone like Demetrius Andrade or Jamal Charlo, and they basically knocked them out within the first 9 to 10 rounds. I mean, it would be pretty crazy.
You don't know them guys either. You can pretend, y'all can pretend like y'all know them guys, but don't nobody know them guys.
And in my opinion, and a certain amount of people may disagree, Vosdick, I actually believe, is on a higher level in terms of boxing intelligence and boxing all-around skills. I believe that he was on a higher level than what Jamal Charlo was. That's why I say, when I take a look at Artur Beterbiev, this is the only dude, in my opinion, that when we take a look at those weight classes, at least, barring, cruiserweight, not talking about cruiserweight, Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol, those are the only two fighters, in my opinion, that have, an extraordinary chance over Canelo. Any other fighters, they have about a 30% chance or less.
Beterbiev looks good against the guys he's been fighting, okay? And he got 2 good wins under his belt. Credit to Artur Beterbiev. I'm not saying the guy can't fight. Of course he can fight. Okay? Is he a threat to Canelo? Sure. However, Artur Beterbiev still has work to do at light heavyweight. I talk about this all the time. I'm the only person who consistently for years talks about the lack of undisputed at light heavyweight. I was talking about this back when Andre Ward first moved up to light heavyweight, when I was saying how I want to see Adonis Stevenson face Andre Ward. The winner.
That would have been a great fight, in my opinion. Unfortunately, that fight did not happen. That was kind of the only fighter left that within those weight divisions that Andre Ward had left to beat, because of course he beat Carl Froch and Mikhail Kessler and Arthur Abraham, I believe. And did he ever face Sakio Bika? I'm not sure if he ever faced Sakio Bika. But, he beat Chad Dawson as well, Sergey Kovalev, Mikhail Kessler, all those fighters. The one fighter that he didn't get his hands on was Adonis Stevenson. But it is what it is. But let me say this about Adonis Stevenson, because a bunch of people, they wanted to see Sergey Kovalev versus Adonis Stevenson as well. But the reason why that fight didn't happen was because Adonis Stevenson was scared to death of Sergey Kovalev. There's no offense against Adonis Stevenson. Adonis, in my opinion, was he was a great fighter to a degree, but you can't be remembered with some of the all-time greats because the only big win in your career that you have was Chad Dawson. And then overall, the second biggest fight of your career was over Alexander Vosdick. And you lost that fight by knockout, so it is what it is. Now, he was older there, but at the end of the day, Adonis Stevenson does have to be penalized, because not only did he avoid the Sergey Kovalev fight, Adonis Stevenson, I mean, there's so many names that he could have fought, but instead he just decided to do these bullshit mandatory fights with the WBC title. Like, I'm sorry, but you have to be penalized. So Adonis Stevenson, he's a great fighter, but for example, he cannot be remembered, in my opinion, as one of the top 100 boxers of all time. So he cannot be remembered on that same level as, say, an Andre Ward. He can't be remembered on the same level, in my opinion, as a Sergey Kovalev or, some of those other guys. Even though I think that he was extremely talented. But who did you fight?
Andre Ward versus Kovalev. And even prior to Andre Ward moving up, we want to see Adonis Stevenson versus Kovalev. That's how long I've been talking about undisputed at light heavyweight. Now, Bivol still has a title up there. I believe Joe Smith has a title up there. Let Artur Beterbiev clean up the Vanilla Skies. Let him do
that. Let him clean up the Vanilla Skies. Basically, what is 78 Sports TV saying? He's saying, let, Artur Beterbiev clean up overall that Caucasian-filled division. I'm not sure if he's necessarily insinuating that maybe it's not the most talented division, but let me say overall this. I think 175 actually is very decently talented. Not only did you have Marcus Brown there, who had and a lot of these fighters, they have great Olympic pedigrees. So some of these fighters, man, they're no joke.
Right? Once he becomes undisputed, he does something great in his own division, then he can start worrying about Canelo. But listen, man, a lot of people are, oh, man, he ducking Canelo. Canelo ducking Artur Beterbiev. Oh, Canelo, he cherry picking. Listen, cool. How are you going to say Canelo's ducking Artur Beterbiev when Beterbiev hasn't put himself in a position to even demand a Canelo fight?
Well, of course, some people would argue, maybe someone like Dante's Boxer Nation that would say, well, what put, Avni Yildirim and some of those other fighters in a position, but not these other elite fighters. Listen, all I'm going to say is this. Like I said, if Canelo wants to be remembered as one of the top 10 greatest boxers to ever participate in this sport, he is going to have to consistently face a great competition. I think that this next Makabu fight, I actually think that it's a great matchup. I actually think that it's a great fight for Canelo's legacy. Once again, that's not me saying that Makabu is, or Makabu, however you pronounce his name, the one African dude. That's not me saying that he's an A-grade fighter, but the reason why it's a decent matchup is because Canelo's going all the way up to cruiserweight. And hopefully there is no weight drain, but we'll have to see what happens. But after that, Canelo overall, he is going to have no more excuses to not face any A-grade fighters. So that means what? He may be able to get away with a mandatory, but then after that, so basically what, within the next 3 fights, you are going to have to face someone that's A-grade. That means who? Jamal Charlo, David Benavidez, Dimitri Bivol, Artur Beterbiev, Demetrius Andrade, am I missing anyone here? Gilberto Zerdo Ramirez. Those would be the main 6 to 5 fighters, however many I mentioned. Those are the main fighters that Canelo Alvarez is going to have to face.
There was never ever in time or place where any sanctioned body, even when Canelo was at 175, no sanctioned body ever said, Artur Beterbiev, you're Canelo Alvarez's number 1 contender, or you're the mandatory for Canelo. And then Canelo ran off and said, I'm not fighting. Never happened. Never happened. Okay? So how is Canelo ducking this man? Canelo is a freestyle fighter. He fight at any weight he want to fight at. He bounced around from weight to weight. The man has earned, Canelo Alvarez, despite what we may feel about him and the shenanigans and different advantages Canelo has in his fights, regardless of what we feel about him, the man has earned his right to have a little bit of respect, man. A little bit of respect here. I'm just a little bit, okay?
I tend to agree. And when it comes down, like I said, a lot of these guys, especially a lot of these other channels like Dante's Boxing Nation and, Aki TV, and I'll give 78 Sports TV a lot of credit for this video because I think that he's being somewhat decently logical and objective. And in my opinion, 78 Sports TV, he's not always a guy that tends to do that, but it is what it is. Now, is this just me saying that because, me and him have the same opinion on Canelo? I mean, possibly, but like I said, at the end of the day, he sees the same thing that I see. That Canelo Alvarez, when it comes down to it, he's on a whole nother level compared to most of these fighters. We'll talk about Gennady Golovkin here a little bit in this video because I believe 78 Sports TV, he's going to mention something about him, and we're going to talk about that as well.
I'm not finna hop on this Artur Beterbiev train, okay? I've seen this fool before, boy. You see, Artur Beterbiev was Triple G. Oh, yeah. See, everybody want to, just throw Triple G away now. But I remember when Triple G was Triple G.
I remember as well. And Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, at the time, he was looked at as the biggest threat to anyone that was going to be facing someone at 160 pounds. He even was a big viable threat to certain people at 168 pounds. Carl Froch didn't even want to face him. So, Gennady Triple G Golovkin, he was a real deal fighter. No doubt about it. But, you can tell overall when certain fighters are going to be on the next level. Because certain fighters, when they're in that matchup to where it's like, okay, I'm going to have to win this matchup. But if I win this matchup, it's going to be because I went to hell and back. There's certain matchups that you take a look at that. Even if those fighters were to win big, early on matchups in their career, which matchups overall are different than some of the earlier, bigger matchups. And Canelo Alvarez, when he fought Gennady Golovkin, that was a generational type of matchup. Like, that type of matchup was like the Sugar Ray Leonard versus Tommy Hearns or Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler type of fight. That's what that type of fight was. Now, some people overall, they may say that, I'm overrating Golovkin with that or whatever. Listen, at the end of the day, it's like this. We all know Gennady Golovkin is an A-grade fighter, at least during his prime. There's no doubt about that. But Canelo Alvarez, when he had his back up against the wall, he was able to prove to all of us and prove to the world, at least in the rematch, that he was the better fighter out of the two. So Canelo deserves a hell of a lot of respect. And that's why, in my opinion, especially out of any other fighter today, he is the clear number 1 pound-for-pound fighter. Because I don't know if there's any other fighter in the world today that when they were in that type of a matchup, they were able to overall pull out of it, at least quite as of yet. Now, if Terrence faces Errol Spence Jr. and is able to dominate him, or if he's able to beat him the same way Canelo was able to beat Gennady Golovkin, then we can say that Terrence Bud Crawford is on that sort of level. But not until,
You know what I'm saying? I remember.
And of course, Alexander Usyk, he was in the biggest fight of his life, of course, against Anthony Joshua, and he was able to completely embarrass him. So that's why, in my opinion, Usyk, he actually may even have to be number 2 on my pound-for-pound list.
When he was knocking out everybody, people was ducking him. Everybody was ducking him, I remember.
And then, of course, you have Tyson Fury, who embarrassed Vladimir Klitschko and Deontay Wilder. Two generational type of matchups. So Tyson Fury is that's why I say, certain people, they may disagree with Tyson Fury being in my top 5 pound for pound. You can tell overall which types of fights are generational fights. And when Tyson Fury fought Deontay Wilder, and when he fought Vladimir Klitschko, that was the Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler, or the Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Manny Pacquiao for his division.
Including Canelo at one point in time. Miguel Cotto. Go back before Miguel Cotto. Sergio Martinez. All them guys were ducking Triple G. I was here for all of it. I was a fan of Triple G. I saw how the media promoted him as this foreign.
Well, I highly doubt overall that you were a fan of Triple G. But, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But 78 Sports TV, from what I've seen anyway, from my experience, he never usually seems to be a big fan of the Caucasian fighters or the Caucasians in general, but it is what it is.
Crusher, the European Crusher, and all this type of stuff, and this phenom, it couldn't be stopped, coming to take over the world, right? It looked good, great. Canelo spanked him twice. And Triple G.
Well, he didn't really spank Triple G twice, but at the end of the day, Canelo was able to get the victory in the rematch. It is what it is. The first fight, in my opinion, was wrongly scored a draw. I do think that Gennady should have clearly won the first fight over Canelo, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, it was scored a draw. But in the rematch, when overall both of them had better preparation and overall both had experience over one another, it was Canelo Alvarez out of the two that made the better adjustments. So it is what it is.
Still sitting around begging for a third fight, right? He ain't been the same since Canelo spanked him. What happened to all the Triple G love? What happened to all the Triple G fans? They gone. They disappeared. What happened to the Crusher? Sergey Kovalev, another one from the.
And basically what I think 78 Sports TV is trying to allege here is that, some of these Eastern European fighters, they're always, very, very hyped up, but then they rarely deliver results. Well, sometimes, but some of them are real deal fighters. Both Sergey Kovalev and Gennady Golovkin, in my opinion, they were real deal fighters. Sergey Kovalev, there's a reason why he gave Andre Ward the toughest test of his career. Both of those fights were hell on Andre Ward. That's why Andre Ward, after that fight, he said, fuck this, I'm retiring. I proved everything that I needed to prove. I ain't taking any more damage.
Vanilla Sky. Another one of the Eastern European guys who they said was just this unstoppable force. Not only did Andre Ward destroy him, but Canelo Alvarez moves up in weight.
Well, Andre Ward didn't destroy him, and really, Canelo Alvarez didn't destroy him either. Because Canelo Alvarez, like I said, Dante's Boxing Nation and certain people, they always want to try to promote this narrative that, Canelo's only facing these weak Caucasian fighters. Some of them Caucasian fighters gave Canelo Alvarez a hell of a time. Like when we talk about Canelo Alvarez's most difficult fights throughout his career, at least with rounds that he may have been clearly losing or that he was losing. One of those fights, of course, was against Floyd Mayweather Jr., a fight that I thought that Canelo clearly lost. But besides Floyd Mayweather Jr., let's talk about all the other fighters that Canelo has fought who clearly are not on Floyd's level because Canelo has never suffered another loss. But it is what it is, at least officially. Arasani Lara gave him a hell of a time. But besides Arasani Lara, all the other one have been Eastern European fighters, whether it be Gennady Golovkin or Sergey Kovalev. I think Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant, that they gave Canelo some rounds, but they weren't really winning the fight by the time Canelo Alvarez stopped them. Sergey was very competitive in that fight against Canelo, but I did think that Canelo was pulling out the decision because I just didn't see Sergey land a whole lot of flush punches.
When even after Ward spanked Kovalev, even after that, people was telling me, and y'all see it, the videos is on YouTube, it's in the comments, we're in the comments.
I made it through the wilderness. Somehow I made it through.
Videos is on YouTube, it's in the comments, we're in the comment section. People were saying the Crusher Kovalev was going to spank Canelo Alvarez. Canelo a fool if he go up there and fight Kovalev, they say.
Well, at the time, just looking at it realistically, I thought that it was probably, I think I either said 60-40 in favor of Canelo or 70-30. Because I did know that Sergey Kovalev, that he was not necessarily the same fighter that he had used to be, but he was an A- fighter. And that was going to be the first fight that Canelo was going to have at light heavyweight. So, there's a certain amount of people that try to degrade that win, but... was that the same Sergey Kovalev that fought Andre Ward? No, but that was a Sergey Kovalev that was still a very talented fighter. He was coming off of 2 very good wins over 2 very talented fighters for the light heavyweight division. Now, if you want to say that a later Alvarez and, Anthony Yard, that they're not really, A-grade fighters, that's up to you. But at the end of the day, Sergey Kovalev was one of the 4 champions there. And Sergey Kovalev, he was a real deal fighter.
He better not go up there.
It's not like he was Amir Khan or Kell Brook when Terrence Crawford fought them. Completely washed up and didn't even have a belt.
Fight Kovalev. Kovalev hit too hard, man. That weight is different up there. It's different up there, man. Canelo went up there, banged on the crusher, and what happened? What happened? The fight was fixed. It was a setup. And that's what everybody gonna say. If Canelo ever fight, better be there.
We'll see. I don't doubt that, here and there. But what I am going to say is this: fighting an Artur Beterbiev, especially maybe within like the next year, that would be something that would be, in my opinion, a bigger challenge than fighting Sergey Kovalev at that point in time in his career. Artur Beterbiev, I believe, has more of an extensive and expansive background in the amateurs. For those of you that, of course, remember, Artur Beterbiev actually beat Sergey Kovalev, I believe, in the amateurs or in the Olympics. So Artur Beterbiev is a person that this dude's no joke. And on top of that, Artur Beterbiev, I think he even has more power than that of a prime Sergey Kovalev. Artur Beterbiev, he can sometimes tend to be a little bit stiff, and it's not like he's impossible to hurt. But Artur Beterbiev, man, if he continues to go forward, I would love to see how Canelo Alvarez handles that fight. Because that would be very, very interesting. Because Artur Beterbiev, not only is he going to have power, in my opinion, that Canelo has never felt. Because Artur Beterbiev, in my opinion, he probably even has more power than that of a Triple G. I mean, he is a tremendous puncher. If Canelo were able to beat Artur Beterbiev, that truly would be another all-time great win for his career.
He gonna spank the boy. All the things that make Artur Beterbiev look great against these other opponents, when he fights Canelo Alvarez, he's gonna look foolish. This is why. He gonna come forward on Canelo, right? Now,
that's what number 1 pound-for-pound fighters do. And that's why I say 78 Sports TV with this video, he says this, he sees the same things in Canelo Alvarez. And, this is why I say that, in my opinion, he is debatably going to be a future, top 10 boxer of all time. Because when I take a look at Canelo Alvarez, I see the same things. Canelo is a person that, when I take a look at Canelo Alvarez is a dude that he's not to be messed with. This dude, certain people, they think that they're going to go in there and just, either out-muscle or out-power or out-slick Canelo Alvarez, but almost every single time they get in the ring with Canelo Alvarez, it almost ends up being a different result. The only one that has ever definitively beat Canelo Alvarez was Floyd Mayweather Jr. That was it. There's no other person that, within his career has definitively beat him. Now, I did think that Gennady Golovkin probably should have got the nod in the first fight, but it is what it is. You can argue that Lara should have got the nod, but at the end of the day, that's not what happened. And you can debate that Lara maybe should have done more in their fight. So it is what it is. So at the end of the day, man, especially at this point in time in his career, there's certain matchups that I think are very great for Canelo, like Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant. Those guys are both A-grade fighters, in my opinion. And Canelo, he's able to turn it up to another level that they're just not able to. But it's not even just about that. Canelo, what makes number 1 pound-for-pound fighters is the all-around great game that they have. Combined with athleticism and boxing intelligence and defense and all in all the skills that they have. That's why I say when I take a look at Canelo Alvarez, he reminds me of Floyd Mayweather Jr., he reminds me of Manny Pacquiao, he reminds me of Sugar Ray Leonard, he reminds me of Roy Jones Jr., any other former 1 pound-for-pound fighter in, the world of boxing. That's who he reminds me of. In my opinion, Canelo Alvarez, at the end of his career, he's going to be more on the level of a Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather Jr. and, Marvin Hagler and Sugar Ray Leonard and Rocky Marciano and whoever the hell else you want to compare him to that may be in your top 10. In my opinion, he's probably going to be more on their level. Roberto Duran, Julio Cesar Chavez, Carlos Monsoon, those fighters. He's going to be more on those guys' level than what he probably is overall on the Bernard Hopkins or Oscar De La Hoya or Shane Mosley or Miguel Cotto level. One could debate that he's already surpassed those guys. So it is what it is.
Think about Beterbiev. You ain't got to worry about him being afraid to come forward and all that kind of stuff. He's going to come forward against Canelo. Right? Canelo.
Well, we'll see about that. Because certain fighters who are come forward fighters or they pressure certain fighters like a Gennady Golovkin, or a Deontay Wilder. Now, in my opinion, Gennady Golovkin, in terms of skills and experience, he's way ahead of Deontay Wilder. But Canelo overall was able to expose some weaknesses in Gennady Golovkin's game, by backing him up. And Gennady, all in all, he was not, able to outbox Canelo Alvarez while being on the back foot. He didn't do too bad, in my opinion. But, Canelo, he knew what advantages he had. And Eddie Reynoso, I think, coached him very, very good in those two fights, or at least, especially in that rematch, because he said, you're not stronger than this guy. Don't try to knock this guy out. You're going to have to outspeed him. You're going to have to throw combinations. You're going to have to back him up a little bit. Be smart. And even with that, Canelo, in my opinion, he won by the skin of his teeth, but he still won. And that's what great fighters do. Even in the toughest of matchups, they find a way to win. That's why I say, he's on that Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao level, at least when I just take a look overall at his skills. Now, if you want to debate that Floyd and Manny Pacquiao and some of those other fighters were more skilled than him, that's your business. Personally, I would actually say this, and a certain amount of people are going to heavily disagree with me here. But in my opinion, Canelo Alvarez, at least when you compare him to Manny Pacquiao, I actually think Canelo Alvarez, prime be prime, I actually think he's more skilled than Manny Pacquiao. Now, I think that Manny Pacquiao, I think that he has better hand speed. I think that, he probably has a little bit of better footwork, at least in certain moments, than Canelo. And, he may even be able, he's certainly faster with his feet than Canelo. But, let me say this about Canelo Alvarez. Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, was a better defensive fighter right now than what Manny Pacquiao ever was. That doesn't always mean that I think that, that Canelo should be just put over Manny Pacquiao in the ranks right now, because once again, Manny Pacquiao, he's a much more proven fighter throughout his career than what Canelo, I guess, is at this current moment in time. But like I said, when I take a look at Canelo Alvarez, when I take a look at fighters facing, when I see fighters facing him in the ring, it's like the same feeling that I've seen fighters, face when they face like a Floyd Mayweather Jr. or Manny Pacquiao. They're like, wow, this dude is a lot better, a lot quicker, a lot stronger than what I thought that he was. Wow, this dude overall, his angles, his feet are a lot faster than what I thought. Wow, this guy's hitting me from almost every angle, but I can't even touch him. I can't even see him. That's what it's like almost fighting Canelo Alvarez. Certain fighters, they think that they're just going to out-slick him or that they're going to be able to outbox him. But once they get in the ring with him, they're like, wow, I can't even touch this dude. And on top of that, his counter-punching ability is so accurate. That's why I say, when I take a look at Canelo, certain people, like Dante's Boxing Nation, they'll try to say overall, oh, well, Canelo, you can't even compare him to some of the other all-time greats like a Marquez or Eric Morales or, a Marco Antonio Barrera or Oscar De La Hoya. Canelo is above all those fighters, man. I know people overall, they're going to deny it, but let me say this. Canelo is all that, and let me say this, and I mean this 100%. And I've said this many times before. Canelo is greater, and he's better than all those fighters ever were. There's a reason why Eric Morales, Marco Antonio Barrera, and Juan Manuel Marquez, there's a reason why they have multiple losses in their career. Now, if you want to debate that Canelo has multiple losses in his career, that that's up to you. But at the end of the day, you can debate that he got the victory over Araceli Lara. But what Canelo Alvarez really is, he's somewhat, at least in terms of skills, he's on that Julio Cesar Chavez level. And I think that he is actually even debatably above that of a Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. All those other Mexican fighters, there's no other Mexican fighter besides Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. that is on the Canelo Alvarez level. There just isn't. Oscar De La Hoya can't be on that level because he was not as skilled as the prime Canelo Alvarez. When you take a look at Oscar De La Hoya, there's a reason why he lost the majority of the big fights in his career. Of course, they'll point to that he beat Ricardo Mayorga and he beat Fernando Vargas and a certain amount of others, but take a look at his fight against Shea Mosley. He also lost to Felix Tito Trinidad. Now, one could certainly debate that Oscar De La Hoya deserved that fight, but Oscar, once again, there's a reason why he did lose a certain amount of the big fights in his career. It just is what it is. When I take a look at Canelo, there's only one fighter in his career that he has clearly lost to, and that was the number one pound-for-pound fighter, and that was when Canelo Alvarez was 21 years old. Now, I'm not trying to use that as an excuse, but all I'm saying is this. If you're going to try to use, basically and say that, oh, well, Canelo, he can never be compared on those guys' level because he lost to Floyd Mayweather Jr. or whatever, blah, 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 blah. That's true. If you maybe don't want to put him on the Floyd Mayweather Jr. level because of that, I would certainly understand it. But at the end of the day, shit, who was able to beat Floyd? Manny Pacquiao wasn't. Miguel Cotto wasn't. Genaro Hernandez wasn't. Jose Luis Castillo, Juan Manuel Marquez. They weren't able to get the job done. Marcos Maidana wasn't able to get the job done. No one in the history of boxing was able to beat Floyd Mayweather Jr. So Canelo Alvarez, for the performance that he had over Floyd Mayweather Jr. when he was 21 years old, and still at an A-grade point in his career, but not the fighter that he is now, in my opinion, I'm not going to hold that against Canelo Alvarez, at least, majorly. So it is what it is.
Knows how to box and move from the outside, as he showed you in the first Triple G fight, okay? He also knows how to stand his ground and use his upper body movement, bending his waist like an old school 1988 He-Man toy. He knows how to bend his waist and get out of the way and avoid punches and come up and fire devastating counter punches. You see what I'm saying? Devastating.
I agree. Canelo Alvarez is a devastating counterpuncher. And that's why certain people, they're afraid to throw against him because, certain people, they may ask the question, well, why is this guy, why is he not fighting, or excuse me, why is he not pressuring him, or why is he not throwing these certain types of punches? Because, it's you lose confidence after a while when you're missing your punches, which, expends energy. And then on top of that, your opponent is hitting back with excellent counter shots. That's why I say, Canelo, when I take a look at him, I don't see Oscar De La Hoya. I don't see, Bernard Hopkins or other fighters that were great, but not on the top 10, top 20, or top 30 level, in my opinion. Canelo, when I take a look at him, like I said, he's number one pound for pound potential. Like he's on that Floyd and Manny Pacquiao level almost in terms of skills. Now, once again, if you want to say that those two fighters were ahead of him, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But Canelo, like I said, when you take a look at him, there's a very big possibility that Canelo may end up eventually being in the top 10 boxers of all time. I have no doubt about that in my mind whatsoever. That he at least has the potential of doing that.
Counter punches, and Canelo makes people afraid to throw because his counters are so pinpoint accurate and so vicious. They're afraid to throw with the man. See, I suspect.
I agree with that. And if Artur Beterbiev, he could get very discouraged early on. But what I will say is this, is that, against Marcus Brown and Gvozdyk, even when he was a little bit discouraged, he or not discouraged, but even when he was getting countered, he did throw back. So Artur Beterbiev, if he is going to possibly beat Canelo, he is going to have to throw more consistently than Canelo. He's going to have to throw more than Canelo. If you're going to beat someone like a Canelo Alvarez or Floyd Mayweather Jr., who is kind of who Canelo Alvarez kind of reminds me of. If Canelo, if he ends up overall facing Artur Beterbiev has to throw more than Canelo because you're not going to out counterpunch him, dude. Like, there's no fighter in the world right now, in my opinion, that would be able to out counter Canelo Alvarez. There's just not one. There's not one fighter in the world right now, in my opinion, at least that's an active boxer, that is a better counterpuncher than a Canelo Alvarez. Not one. His counters, in my opinion, are so crisp and so clean. And on top of that, his defense, he's just so accurate with his punches. Like I said, there's some of them special fighters like a Floyd that they have like a 50% landing percentage, and it's just extremely hard to hit them. That's why so many fighters, they're eventually discouraged to throw against Canelo because you can barely land anything. It just is what it is. So Artur Beterbiev, what he's going to have to do is that he's going to have to mix up the jab. He can't be one-dimensional with his jab. He has to go to the body consistently and go to the head. You have to mix it up. You're going to have to go to his body consistently. And if that means that sometimes you're going to get countered, that means sometimes you're going to get countered. You're also going to have to move in and out. You can't completely pressure Canelo Alvarez 100% of the time because Canelo is an expert overall counterpunching, even up against the ropes. I've seen it against Austin Trout. I've seen it against Gennady Golovkin. I've seen it against a few other fighters. James Kirkland. Canelo Alvarez is an excellent counter-puncher. So Artur Beterbiev, he has to be smart. In my opinion, he has to throw a little bit more than that of a Canelo Alvarez. He has to go to the body consistently. And he has to move back and forth. He has to know how to use his feet.
The Beterbiev is going to come in there and fight. This is all hypothetical because I don't even know if the fight ever going to happen. I suspect that every time I do a video, here come this fire alarm. Whatever this is. Now look, I suspect Artur Beterbiev will come forward against Canelo and try to bully him. Once he feels Canelo's sturdiness, because Canelo's a solid dude, he got low center of gravity, he's solid, and he's quick, deceptively quick, right? And he has.
I agree. He is quick.
Power.
And the better counterpuncher you are, the quicker that it seems like your opponent is. And that makes the opponent lose even that much more confidence. Even if, they're not extremely quick. The more accurate you are, the quicker it seems overall like they are. Like I remember when Eddie Alvarez, when he fought Conor McGregor, and Conor, in my opinion, he's never been someone that has, been Speedy Gonzalez in the sport, but he was such an accurate counterpuncher, especially with his left hand early on in his career when he was at his peak. I remember when Eddie Alvarez, every single time he tried to go forward with Conor McGregor just whipped that left hand down the pipe and he would literally catch him every single time. And they asked Eddie Alvarez after the fight, they said, was his power on a whole nother level, to what you thought it was going to be? And he said, yeah, sure, he was powerful, but the thing that really surprised me was the speed. Because when you have people that especially really know how to box, and Conor actually is a pretty decent boxer, or was a decent boxer, for his day, especially for a UFC fighter. You can tell that he has boxed in the past because of the way that he can work angles and work distance and yada, yada, yada. Canelo Alvarez is, for boxing, like, he's very, very similar. Because Canelo, he has excellent timing, he has excellent defense, and he can hit you in return almost at will. But, you're not going to be able to hit him consistently. So that's why so many people, they eventually end up losing confidence over Canelo. Because they're like, damn, I can't hit this dude. And on top of that, he's hitting me almost every time that he wants to.
Once he feels Canelo's power and speed and accuracy, I suspect Artur Beterbiev, after a few misses, that's all it's going to take, is about 5 or 6 misses. Once he misses Canelo...
Hello, I'm Sir Richard Branson, and I'm founder of Virgin Voyages.
And I'm Ryan Reynolds, owner.
Once he misses Canelo avoids those shots and come back with a counter, he's going to be discouraged like everybody else. He's going to be discouraged like everybody else. See what I'm saying? And then he's going to stop throwing punches and start trying to be a sharpshooter, trying to play Canelo's game. And voila, there you have it. Canelo Alvarez defeats Artur Beterbiev. You know what I'm saying? Canelo Alvarez defeats Artur Beterbiev. And what's going to happen is, after the fight, y'all going to say it was a robbery. Y'all going to say the judges cheated for Canelo. Y'all going to say Canelo took some extra juice. Y'all going to say all of that. And all those things might be true. But at the end of the day, I've seen this story before with Bane. Okay? I've seen this savage, monstrous European coming in who's knocking out everybody and has the whole world trembling. You know what I'm saying? Watch out, y'all. Here come the monster. Watch out now. We gotta go hide. Here come the monster. I seen this movie before, right? I watched Friday the 13th. I watched Halloween. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many it is. I watched them.
Well, I understand overall what 78 Sports TV is saying. But in a roundabout way, I don't think that he's only talking about the European fighters. I think that he's also talking about a certain amount of fighters that may face Canelo Alvarez. And to be quite honest with you, there's no fighter out there that I would particularly favor over Canelo because, like I said, when I watch him, I see another Floyd Mayweather Jr. I see another Manny Pacquiao. Basically, what am I saying? I'm not saying that he has 100% exactly the same fighting style as them, or I'm not saying all in all that he has 100% similarities with them, but what I am saying is that when I take a look at Canelo, you know that you're watching something special. You know that you're seeing a dude that could potentially be one of the 10 greatest boxers of all time, or at least within that top 20. It's like if you watch, football, we can take a look at Patrick Mahomes. Now, Patrick Mahomes, of course, he's very early on in his career. And there's a certain amount of people that would say that, he's overrated. It's just the system. But, if you're a person that knows football, if you're a person that knows talent when you see it, you take a look at Patrick Mahomes and you're like, wow, that dude is going to become a future top 10 quarterback of all time, at least if he keeps going the way that he's going.
I've seen this story before in Triple G and in Sergey Kovalev. Listen, if you let your hatred for Canelo Alvarez blind you, you're going to be sucked in again. Right? And then when he smashed Beterbiev, or Beterbiev, whatever you want to call him, when he smashed the Russian, y'all going to have to put Canelo on some iconic all-time great status because of the myth you're creating with this guy. Better be that.
Well, the thing is this: if Canelo does beat Beterbiev, he will have to be on all-time great status. But in my opinion, Canelo Alvarez is already on all-time great status. He's an all-time great fighter. There's no debate about that. Canelo is an all-time great fighter.
He good. I'm not saying he's not good. The guy can fight. He can fight. Most definitely. I wouldn't want to fight the dude. He can scrap. But he can't beat Canelo. Canelo's smarter than him. Canelo is a...
I agree. Canelo Alvarez more than likely is smarter than him, and I think all in all that he's more skilled than Beterbiev. But Canelo does have to watch out for Beterbiev. Beterbiev is... He almost reminds me of a bigger version of Gennady Golovkin. I'm not going to say that he necessarily is quite the counterpuncher that Gennady Golovkin was, but he's a person that is extremely dangerous. And if he pressures Canelo Alvarez constantly, that's going to be very interesting. Now, a lot of people, they say that they want to see the David Benavidez fight because, David Benavidez, he's going to put that pressure on Canelo Alvarez constantly. That fight is going to end up just like the Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fight. That's what that fight's going to end up like. That's why I don't give David Benavidez. That's why when people say that, Canelo versus David Benavidez needs to happen, that's a great fight. Don't get me wrong. I think that it's a great fight, but I already see how that fight's going to turn out. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I have no problem admitting that I'm wrong. I've been wrong many times before, when it comes down to it. I think we all have to a degree. But when it comes down to it, David Benavidez is not a dude that has an A-grade chin. That's not me saying that he's chinny, but he can be knocked down. He's not a person that I take a look at and I say, wow, he has like a Gennady Golovkin type of chin. He can be knocked down. He can be hurt. He don't have A-grade power. He don't have A-grade defense. He does not have A-grade head movement. He's going to walk in on Canelo Alvarez, and overall he's going to get hit. He's going to get countered. He's probably going to get dropped early. And then he's going to say, oh shit, this dude is a way better counterpuncher and has a hell of a lot more power than what I once originally thought. And he's going to be backing up. That's what's going to happen in that fight. I can guarantee it. But we'll see what happens once again. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Better fighter than this dude. Nobody can deny that. Nobody. It's not one person in the chat that can say Beterbiev is a better fighter than Canelo.
I would agree, but we'll see.
You can't. Now, Canelo finna move up and fight the brother Makabu. Now, if he's successful at cruiserweight against brother Makabu, which I suspect he probably will be because brother Makabu was acting kind of thirsty and just happy to be there. I'm very happy to be here. All that kind of stuff. So if Canelo smashes or defeats Makabu, listen, man, I wouldn't be surprised if he fought this guy Beterbiev. But Beterbiev would have to become undisputed at 175. He has to give Canelo a reason to fight him. Because right now,
Well, we'll see what happens. I think that if Canelo Alvarez, if he wants to be remembered in history, he is debatably going to have to face Artur Beterbiev or Dimitri Bivol at least. And I'm talking about in that top 10 level. Because Canelo, he's already accomplished a great amount in his career, but I can't necessarily put you on that top 10 level as of yet unless you keep continuing to face consistent A-grade fighters. Don't get me wrong, Canelo is, he's already a first ballot Hall of Famer. Like, Canelo, when I take a look at him right now, like, let's say if we were comparing him overall to, NBA basketball players or NFL players when it comes down to it, Canelo, in my opinion, he would be like, if I were comparing him to an NBA basketball player, he would at least would have probably the career of, say, like, I'm trying to think overall who to compare him to. He would at least be like on the Dirk Nowitzki level, like that's overall like who he would remind me of in that top 20 to top 30 range. That's where he would rank. But right now, just because of the he has great accomplishments, but I do need to see how great he is against some of the other contenders as well. So right now, Canelo, he's within that top 30 to top 25 range. In my opinion, debatably. But I can't necessarily put you in that top 20 to top 10 quite as of yet, because of those are for the boxers that have accomplished something that almost no one else has before, or that have been at the number one pound for pound position for an extremely long time, or are 100% known as debatably, the best fighter of their era. And when I say era, I'm talking about at least a decade. So, those are the fighters like a Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, Floyd Mayweather Jr., Manny Pacquiao, those guys.
What? Okay, it's a dangerous fight for Canelo for one. For two, it ain't nobody. It ain't no like. It's not a pay-per-view worthy fight because regardless of what y'all say on the
I highly disagree with that. You can try to make the argument that Art should be to be that maybe he doesn't get as many views as some of the other guys out there, but any big fight that Canelo is going to have, Canelo could face Joe Smith Jr. next, and that pay-per-view would do at least 700,000 pay-per-view buys. I can guarantee you that. That's how big of an attraction Canelo Alvarez is. Anything he touches, it almost pretty much turns to gold. It's like that one story overall that you heard about when you were a kid about that one king overall, that anything he touches overall, turns to gold. That's kind of like what Canelo Alvarez is. Any person that he fights is going to get a great amount of views. That's another reason why I would compare him to a Manny Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather Jr. He is the clear face of boxing. It's really not even a debate. It's not even a comparison.
Okay, listen, it ain't a pay-per-view worthy fight because Bitter Biedev haven't sold nothing. He ain't packing no house. He ain't selling out on 5,000.
Well, sure, Better Biev, he's not a person that is usually selling out, but he fought Canelo. If he fought Canelo, I can assure you that fight would sell out. That pay-per-view may even possibly do over 1 million pay-per-view buys.
Arena Stadium. He ain't doing nothing. He just knocking people out, but he from over there where don't nobody care. Well, whatever, man. Y'all gonna accuse me of being a Canelo fanboy now. Oh, 78, you selling out to Canelo. No, absolutely not. I told y'all from the jump. After Canelo beat Caleb Plant, I told y'all, that's it. That's the last straw. Ain't nobody finna beat this dude.
I tend to agree. I don't see a lot of fighters. Like I said, there's 2 fighters on the planet right now that if we're talking about the 160 all the way, or even 154 if you want to include them, the 154 pounders all the way up at least to 175, there's no fighters that I would definitively, rank above Canelo or say that would beat him. There's just none. I mean, like I said, besides Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol, because they have size over Canelo and they are A-class skilled fighters and they have decent power and athleticism, those would really be the only ones that, in my opinion, they may be able to threaten Canelo Alvarez's legacy, but even then, I'm not sure if I would favor them over Canelo. At most, I would give them a 50% chance.
All right, until he move all the way up to get dealt with. I'm not finna fall for this okie doke no more. Every time this dude fight, everybody sitting around having a circle jerk, talking about he finna lose. Oh, he finna lose now. Oh, Charlo not finna beat him. I did a whole video talking about all the people who can beat Canelo Alvarez. From I think I said 160 to 175. I think I said went through the whole situation. Nobody is gonna beat that man.
I agree with you, and that means what? What did 78 Sports TV just say? He pretty much has been saying the same shit that I've been saying. Now, this doesn't mean that the big fights don't need to happen. But, what this is saying is that it's the same shit that I've been saying for the past year about Canelo Alvarez. Ever since I've seen that Gennady Golovkin fight, he has been massively improved ever since that fight. Now, if you want to allege PEDs or whatever, I mean, there's a high chance that he is on some sort of performance enhancer, but there's a high chance that a certain amount of the other boxers are as well. So I'm not really too heavily concerned about that. Canelo, he is the all-time great boxer right now that we're watching. He is the best of this era. At least so far.
Until it's going to be a no-name guy. He can lose a fight, but it's going to be a no-name guy. And ain't going to be one of these guys we expecting him to...
Well, Canelo can possibly lose another fight in his career, but, it's either going to be against a guy that not only is highly skilled, but possibly, is bigger than him, like a Beterbiev or a Dimitri Bivol, or it's going to be a time where he's a little bit more worn down and a little bit older if he's even still fighting by then. So, like I said, I don't see any of these other dudes beating Canelo. I just don't. Like I said, there's only 2 that I would give a high chance to. Artur Beterbiev and Dimitri Bivol. Those are the only ones. There's no other boxer on the planet Earth right now within 160 to 175 that I would give a very high chance to beat Canelo. Not one. Not one.
When, the best shot of somebody beating him is like Brother Makabu or something. This is a guy nobody know. He might surprise everybody and whoop him at cruiserweight. But ain't nobody... None of these guys like
What I'll say is this, and I've said this in my videos, and I'm not going to say that, maybe because Canelo would underestimate him, that Makabu has a better chance. I don't think Canelo is going to underestimate him. Like I said, a certain amount of people, they try to make the narrative and they say, oh, well, he's not even going to last 3 rounds. I think they're going to be a little bit surprised because Makabu, like I said, very powerful. And he's not the worst skilled boxer out there either. So if he's able to beat him, I will be somewhat thoroughly impressed. But we'll see what happens.
Brother Bane and all these guys from gonna beat him. It's not gonna happen. But anyway, that's my opinion on the matter. Y'all let me know what y'all think. 78 Sports TV. Salute to the mighty LDBC.
Anyways, that's really about it for today. But I just thought that I would talk about that because I thought that this would be a very, very interesting conversation. Like I said, and I've said this a multitude of times, when it comes to my conversations about boxing, there's a reason why I like to tend to talk about Canelo Alvarez more than any other boxer. Is it because I'm a super fan of him, or all in all that, I'm just in love with Canelo Alvarez? No. But when it comes down to it, like I said, Canelo, in my opinion, he is the greatest to watch of this era. When I watch Canelo Alvarez, I think overall of an all-time great artist, for their era. If you're a fan of films, if you're a fan of movies, watching Canelo Alvarez is like watching a Martin Scorsese film. Or it's like watching, one of Quentin Tarantino's better movies. Or, I'm trying to think of a great director, another one, maybe, who the hell is another director that I'm forgetting right now? Maybe the dude who did the Dark Knight series. I can't remember. Is it Christopher Nolan or whatever the hell his name is? Watching Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, he's one of the great artists of his era. Like I said, watching Canelo Alvarez, you can tell that this dude is just different. And that's what I've been saying all along. Canelo, he is the Novak Djokovic, the Michael Jordan, I don't want to necessarily, compare him quite to that level yet, because I'm not going to call him the greatest of all time. I don't want to say that, but what I am trying to say is this, whoever you believe overall to be the best, let's say of the 2020s when it comes down to, or the 2010s heading into the 2020s. Now, of course, Mayweather, in my opinion, would get the best vote for the greatest fighter of the 2010s just because of what he accomplished. But you can tell that Canelo, more than likely, now I could be wrong, who knows, maybe I'm just hyping him up a little bit too much. But Canelo, when I watch him, he reminds me of Novak Djokovic when I watch tennis. He reminds me of LeBron James or Stephen Curry when I watch the NBA. He reminds me overall of Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers when I watch the NFL. He reminds me basically that he is the best of this era. That's what Canelo Alvarez really reminds me of. And I do believe that at the end of his career, he will have a real opportunity to be within the top 10 boxers of all time. But we'll see what happens. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.